Over the past period, we've done a couple of interviews where we've chatted about your history, Jersey, going to Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, the business, and so on and so forth. As you look back on your life, would you say that you have achieved your life goals, and how would you describe those life goals?
Well, I suppose, achieve my life goals up to the year 2000. And then, due to family circumstances, Debbie losing a baby, and we ended up staying in Jersey. And then my life became as a retired person. But of course, I was then 70, so I suppose it was time to retire. But what I didn't do, and I always regret the things I didn't do, I didn't put in a good management team to run the firm. But I think that looking back now, that if I had to pay redundancy fee money to all the people that I employed, I'd have gone bankrupt in any case, whichever way it was, because everything went in the wrong direction in Zimbabwe at that time. But generally speaking, I look back and I've done quite well, and I think I've looked after people reasonably well. My employees, I feel that, yes, I had a wonderful team of people, but I let them down in the end by not having placed management in a better management team than I had. And Jenkinson was a good accountant, but he was not an entrepreneur, and he wanted to bring in a chap from Turner Newell, one of Gasket and Cuttings directors, an African chap, and I turned it down. Possibly that was one of the mistakes I made in. If I should have Africanized, and maybe I would have done much better to have allowed that to happen. Better for the people that I employed. What happened was when the liquidator came down to Bulawayo, all my staff were very anti having an auction, and they rioted with her, and she took fright, called the police, and the police came down in riot gear. And that really, I think, put the fear of God up her. And so the auction was cancelled. Then when it was re-auctioned, the time came, there was bad advertising. The auctioneer, I think, was a part of her company, was the auctioneer. And he didn't advertise our plant at all. In fact, it was very badly advertised, the whole thing. And one of the biggest problems, she came down from Harare, and so did the auctioneer. And if it had been local people, I think the auction would have lasted at least a week rather than a couple of days. And but it was a scrap merchant's bonanza, really, for that. Those are the things I regret, that I didn't get involved. I tried to get involved a little bit more. But once you've got a liquidator in, it's out of your hands. And so I regret that. And also, one of the things I do rather stupidly, I always thought the place had a value, And when Pocock's gave us a price, I turned it down because I didn't think it was up high enough. And that really was a mistake also, because things got worse and worse in the country. And so we lost out on that. My lack of decision, or my decisions were incorrect. But other than that, those sort of things, I still think about them a lot, actually. Um, but the past is the past, and you can't do anything about it. And also, whether I could have, I used to be like a snake. Whenever there was a short of jobs were short for the company, I would find a new product. But I don't think I could have done that because of the lack of currency in the country and all sorts of things that I have no idea now of what was happening. But currency control was really it affected every business, and the inflation was so great that mentally I don't think I could have accommodated it. So I think things turned out for the best in the end, I suppose. I'm
I
very
think to be fair,
fortunate.
I think to be fair to Rob Jenkinson and everyone else, is that it's simply everything was in turmoil, and you couldn't get anything from diesel to electricity to
No,
raw
quite right.
materials and foreign currency, and there were so many assaults from different angles that
Well,
even
you're quite
even
right.
the even the best businessmen wouldn't be able to cope with it.
No,
And
no.
what you're mentioning about being able to negotiate the lack of foreign currency, um, it's a full-time job for someone
To do that,
to
yeah,
do that.
yeah. And we lost a very good man in Jeffius Moore. Jeffius was a trade unionist, and he was number two to Morgan Tangerai at one time. And unfortunately, he died. But he was an absolutely fabulous chap for uh, labour relations and things like that. Absolutely terrific when I look back. And he was one of our very quiet but excellent character. But we had so many people that were wonderful people within the company. Um, One of the things that really upsets me at times is the fact that with the inflation, we had a pension scheme within the company for everybody, but not the African people felt, the workers' committee felt that I was trying to steal money from them. It was that I paid in about twice or three times as much as they did into the pension scheme. But with the pension scheme, with the devaluation of money to the degree it was, the scheme, only those who retired early gained from it, but those who were in it at the end, they lost out completely, and they would have been better to have drunk the money, to be quite frank, the way I look at it now, because even myself, I do not have any form of pension, whether it's in Jersey or from Zimbabwe. I don't get a penny at all pension. So I'm as badly off as the actual employees. We're all in the same boat. Um, I do get occasionally a call from Bulawayo, from one of my chaps. It wasn't Gamidi. I've got it in my book, in my phone list, and he occasionally gives me a ring. And I keep in contact. We had a place in Botswana, Radiators Botswana, and I sold that maybe a bit too cheap, but that was with an Indian manager and his wife, Shashi and Shekaram. and gee, I've forgotten his name now. And I see his name on my computer virtually every day. But in my lifetime, I think I've created a lot of wealthy people. um, Shoshi's husband, he's a multi-millionaire now in Botswana, and he moved to Gaborone, and that's where possibly I should have moved Radiators Botswana to Gaborone in the early days. But he offered me to be a partner in buying a property in Francistown, and I turned it down. So there's no one other than me that that was my responsibility, and I made another mistake there. But who was to know that Botswana would grow to the extent it is? Well, I mean, Gaborone, when I first went down there wasn't even a hotel. But now it's a city. Francistown, I can't tell you if it's grown very much, but it has grown an awful lot compared with when I went down in what would be about the year 1966, or even possibly before that, early days. But there were no roads, no nothing. Then we had a place in Johannesburg, in Jeppe, and that was run by, first of all, Ron Van Eyck went down there and worked down there. And I took over from Leslie's Radiators there. And then that was, I think that was, in a way, an error of mine, because not being an accountant, and I didn't have tight enough control over the whole thing. So I think that I may have gained more money if I didn't bother to have branches. I also had a place in Birmingham, outside between Birmingham and Wolverhampton. And that was a branch selling bronzes there. And of course, there was stocks there, and they ended up selling the stocks, I'm sure, just to pay their own wages. And so I think that, again, my lack of accountancy knowledge was very much to my own detriment. Also, I'd got two, I was possibly underpricing to the branches so that they made a profit. But that was an internal matter within the company, you know. But I used to pay calls on them to Joburg and to the factory in the workshop. It was a big store we had in Birmingham, the one in on the Wolverhampton main road, and that was quite a big store that we got there. And we employed two metal salesmen there, and they were quite busy selling metal, you know, small, and we got a whole range of dimensions there. Yeah, yeah.
When you look back, what were the key events of your life? What do you think stands out? So,
everything stands out to me.
What were turning points? What were the turning points?
Well, one of the biggest turning points in my life was a silly, it may sound silly now, but we had friends, the McDonoughs, I've forgotten his Christian name now. Goes back to 1954, something like that. And what that was Mick McDonald. What Mick said to me, he said, you've got to be able to turn over £1,000, and that is the hardest thing that you will do, is to get to turn over £1,000. Now, what happened was that there was a fire at Rhodesian Alloys in Guello in one of the transformers, and I didn't know about the fire at the time, but that particular organisation, Rhodesian Alloys, was a part of Anglo-American. And Anglo-American were going to fly radiators for the transformers, cooling of the transformers, from England, and put them on a passenger plane and put them on seats, these particular radiators. So one of the chaps who I knew, because of my involvement with corporate developments, he's spoken to Trevor at Radiators from Tinning. So they said no. So they gave me a ring, and Margaret and I and a baby jumped in the van. That would have been Paul. And we drove up in the evening to Guello, and that same evening. And I looked at the job, and I phoned them back and said, oh, that's no problem. I can do that job. Well, I'll be ready within 14 days, it'll be finished. Well, or I may have said a week. I forget the exact time. But then they started to throw penalties at me. And I then panicked when they started to throw penalties at me. And I was very scared of that, because being a firm like Anglo-American, I couldn't I couldn't go against them, as you might say. So, but we did that job, and we did it in record time, much earlier than I'd prophesied in the first place. And that gave me a turnover of maybe over, other than my ordinary work, well over £1,000. And that gave us our first real break in business, that particular job. Just one, it was a huge, it was a panel of, shall we say, maybe 20 individual radiators, which were about 6 foot long, or maybe not quite as long as that, 5 foot long, and clamped on each end onto the manifold. But that was the job that created our start, really a good start in business. And from there, we just carried on growing and growing. And being a stupid man, I was a workaholic. And I put my head down and didn't really look where I was going. I just kept on and on and on. And really, I really regret that I did, in one way, that I didn't lift my head up to see in which direction the country was going. Well, I mean, a lot of of my friends were leaving the country at that time. And one time, most of the Jewish people were leaving, and when that community leaves a place, it's time that you left a place. And I realise that now. The first radiator I made was with Alec Lewin, and Alec was a good friend, and he had the bicycle shop just in the next block to me, and I spent a lot of time with Alex, and he helped me with my very first radiator that I produced. That was at about 1 o'clock in the morning that we finished that. It was a mess, but still, life was very good. All the way in Zimbabwe or Rhodesia, to me it was a lovely country. The people were lovely. It was really a remarkable place. But we also won the lottery. We won a third prize in the lottery, £2,000, and we built the house with that, or at least the cottage, and that was a wonderful experience too. Was to have won that sum of money. I still keep in contact with now with Nina Owen. She's now 90 odd. She's a little bit older than me, but I still talk to her, and she's not as well as she could be, but yeah, yeah. That's I've had a wonderful life, really, but I think I've been a bit selfish with my family. Um, there have been times that I didn't spend enough time and thinking of them going to universities and things like that. And they all went to university. Regrettably, the Zimbabwe and the Rhodesian degrees are not recognised in Europe here, or at least in England. That was a handicap to Paul. Not that he used his accounting degree, but he was quite clever in the various things. And today is the 100th day that he's been in hospital, and he's now waiting to go home. And they're putting handrails up the stairs for him, and I suppose that is a miracle that he's still alive. He just mustn't do the same thing for a third time, otherwise he won't survive. But I'm proud of my family.
Probably should explain that's the fact that he's contracted COVID.
Yeah, he contracted.
And the other instance was his injury when he slid down the slippery slope at Dinah's Pools.
Yeah, well,
broke his leg.
I think I've mentioned that before. Eh?
Yeah, you have. But just picking up again, if you look back on your life, you're talking about key events. You mentioned the lottery. You've mentioned the first job at the factory and whatever. What would you say was the happiest time of your life? What happy memories do you have? What is?
I've been self-satisfied with my life right the way through it. Today, I'm very, very happy to be here, to see the sea, to see the beautiful trees. I consider myself very, very fortunate. Being in Jersey, I always reckon that when I die, all I've got to do is turn over because I'm already in heaven. That may sound a silly thing to say, but it's true. I've been very, very fortunate throughout my life what I didn't like, I was never very much of a soldier. I was in the Territorial Army for a long time. But it wasn't the sort of thing that I enjoyed very much. I was never a person to be in a group of people like that. It's just one of those things, you know, that my character was not that way inclined. But
so how would you describe your character then?
No, Margaret and I think we had a good marriage. We had occasional rows and that, but nothing of any consequence ever. And unfortunately, she passed away in 2011. That's 9 years ago. And I still talk to her. I got a picture up. It's her. As a young girl, it was her Rhodesian driving license picture I've got with a Palm Sunday cross, and she's on beside my bed, and I'm very, very fortunate to be able to look at my photographs, and it's wonderful. I've had a wonderful life, really. I've done everything. I just the things that really upset me is the fact that the politicians in Zimbabwe have made such a mess of things, whereas it could have been. There were two brothers called Gelman. They were twins, Jewish chaps, and they were ranchers in the Congo mainly, and the one brother was in my office, and he said to me, he said, "You know what they ought to do this is prior to Mugabe taking over, and the British government were getting involved. I even met because for many, many years, I was a part of the Chamber of Industries of Bulawayo. I think for something like 10 or 15 years, or maybe 20 years, I was part of Bulawayo's industrial chamber. And we met many politicians, whether they were African or English politicians. The one in particular, who's still alive here now, should have been prime minister in the Conservative time. He was a MP for Sherwood Forest, and met him. I've forgotten his name now. And he, all sorts of politicians. And when you meet these politicians, I can remember a particular time when Gordon Andover, who was the managing director of Dunlop's, had a meeting. Well, we were all in this up at the chamber, but they went off in another part of the chamber to talk just individually. And when Gordon came out of that meeting, he was fuming. He said it was an absolute waste of time talking to the man. He got fixed ideas, and there was nothing that was going to alter them. So that was quite a point of view. And there was another British politician. He was the Prime Minister at one time, who flew into the airport at Umtali. But he didn't fly into the main airport. He flew into the little airport, which was adjacent. It was really a flying club airport. And there was one chap in Askari there who, when the plane landed, there was no customs post or anything there. He'd come in from Mozambique. And this African got hold of him and pushed him in and locked him in the toilet, which was on the airfield. And he was there till the customs officers came down and rescued him and got him out. He was a very senior politician in the British government there when that happened. But that was another very interesting. Oh, another thing I did for Joshua Nkomo, I made him he came and I knew him reasonably well, Joshua Nkomo, and he asked me to make a cross for his father's grave, and I made it all in brass. It was at least 3 foot odd tall, maybe a bit more, and but it was beautiful, really, in polished brass. And that cross is at Hope Fountain, where his father was. Hope Fountain, there's a mission there, and there's a little graveyard, very derelict graveyard, really. Nobody looks after it, or didn't. And when I was here in Jersey, I read in the Sunday Times that somebody had gone to Zimbabwe, and they went they went to the graveyard at Hope Fountain, and they said the only thing that was nice about this particular graveyard, it was so overgrown, was the brass and glass grave of Joshua's dad. And that was my cross that was mentioned in the English Sunday Times. So that was something I was quite proud of. But it was a lovely cross, actually. And I used to come in when we were living in Burnside. We lived in a horrible cottage there, and I was working at CMED at that time. Bob Watt used to pick me up because he lived out at Douglasdale, and he'd built his own place out there. And everybody in those days used to build their own houses. They used to borrow a little bit of money, and they'd either build it very, very roughly, but that was the thing that they had to do. We were all pioneers in those days, and they were very, people don't realize that how primitive the country was in the 1950s, or even before that. I mean, the Royal Air Force were in Bulawayo, at Heaney, Camborne, and Ingwello too, and very big. And a lot of those people came back to Rhodesia to live, the Royal Air Force chaps. And that's really what created really the start of the country. Was the development of the country was with those ex-RAF people coming back and building the country up. But the country's still grown, even in, if you look at the, today, if you look at the amount of tobacco that's grown and the amount of wheat that they anticipate growing, the country must be still doing reasonably well. But as I said yesterday, if only they could put Zimbabwe onto the gold standard, and with the diamonds and the gold they've got, and if only they could back their currency with gold, their troubles would be over, I'm sure. And somebody needs to mention that, or get some politician, perhaps Dave Coulthard should, he's the only one, or my old friend, we went on one of the trade fairs we went to, it was in Hamburg, and Margaret was with me on that particular trip, and Margaret and the secretary, I forgot her name now, they were chatting with a well-known, still alive, he's an economist in Harare, still alive. What's his name, Jeremy? He's an economist, and he's still working. He must be quite old now. And they were talking about all sorts of things, Margaret and this, and it was quite funny to hear them talking. But at that particular show grounds, it was the Stadthaus of Hamburg, and adjacent to it was a stock exchange. But when they brought all the stuff, the exhibits in, there was a chap there, John, I've forgotten his name now. He was a carver, and these Germans were trying to move this very big stone statue to bring it into the pavilion. Well, there were 2 or 3 chaps all struggling there to get it in, and old John just pushed them on one side, put his shoulder underneath this dirty, great big piece of rock, and carried it into there. And the Germans just stood there open mouthed to see this chap carrying that rock into there. And some of these exhibitions that we went to were always great fun because you met all sorts of people from other industries. And Margaret and I enjoyed those sort of trips. Yeah.
Dad, if you think back on your parents, some of the characteristics in your family have been handed down to you. What sort of characteristics do you think you've got from your mum and dad?
Well, I definitely haven't got my dad's skills. That my dad was a very, very practical man, and his skill at shaping metal was outstanding. Now, one time I was working at Panel Crafts in Birmingham, and we'd built the prototype of the Morris Minor car there, and they were so. I compare my dad with those panel beaters that were in that shop. They were fantastic there also, the skills that were there. But I never could hold a candle to my dad. I don't know, I hadn't got the flair. But my mom was a completely different character of fish. They never took chances financially, and they should have done. It would have been sensible to have done so. But I think it was one must always take into consideration the time that these things happen. People didn't sort of borrow money. That wasn't the done thing. And so I'm not blaming them, but they could have been a lot better off than what they were. But they enjoyed life. They enjoyed life together. They were a very good couple. They were good living. But if Mum got angry with us, or Shirley and I, if we'd done some misdemeanor of some sort, she always took the hook out of her coat hanger and she'd chase us up the stairs with the coat hanger. And that was the thing. At Three the Deans, we got stairs and we'd always run up the stairs out the way, Shirley and I. But she used to occasionally get angry with us. But no, she was a good mum. And we were always very well clothed. I can remember, when I was 7, I had a mastoid operation. And I was 7 weeks in hospital then. And I was recuperating when it was either one of the kings, and there was a ceremony and all the people marching past the general hospital. And I was in the window there. Well, I was only 7-year-old at that particular time. And but I've never really had trouble with my ears since. I've been health-wise, I've been very, very fortunate. I had high blood pressure from a very early age, about 23, 24, 25 or something like that. And I've been on pills all my life for high blood pressure. And I think certain pills in the old days were detrimental to your general health. But I'm still on pills. I take 4 pills every day now in the mornings and 1 at night. But it's usually iron pills or something like that. And I can't tell you what they are.
Did you ever recover from taking the dog's hormone tablets that you mixed up with your
many years
blood pressure pill?
In Bulawayo, where tablets during the time of UDI, they didn't have. They only put your pills into into envelopes, wage envelopes. And one day, by mistake, I took the dog's pills rather than my own. And no, but there was no repercussions on that. I can't remember any at all. But we had two wonderful dogs at various times.
I thought it stopped you weeing on the floor, because wasn't the dog taking them because she was weeing on the floor? So I thought maybe it resolved any particular issue that you may have had.
No. Well, I mean, I've been, for the last 10 years, I had prostate cancer, and I spent about a month in Southampton at the hospital there having radio treatment on that. Now, that affected my waterworks. For the last 10 years, or longer than that, 12 years, I've been having to self-catheterize myself. And that must have cost the states of Jersey, because your medication is free here. And these boxes, I think, are about £50 a box. And I use 4 boxes a month. So over the last 12 years that I've been using these things, it must have cost the states a fortune. So I'm very fortunate from that aspect that my medical, for pills and that, it's all covered by the Jersey states.
If you were to chat to a young person, if you were mentoring a young person, what advice would you give him or her?
I've often had young people sit in front of me when I was in the office in Bulawayo, and sometimes you get a youngster arrive and they just sit there and they'd say, "I've come for a job," and I'd say, "Well, how old are you?" They say 17. I said, "Well, haven't you had any experience in your life? Can't you tell me anything about yourself?" And they'd say no. I said, "Well, go back and think about it and then come back and see me." But the one advice I give to all the boys, and your boys, and I gave this only yesterday to Jonathan, things are going to be very, very difficult for jobs in the future. And one is going to have to take almost any job just to get some form of income at first. But make sure you got your mindset, you know where you want to be and where you want to go. And you've got to be prepared to, like if you were sailing, you've got to be prepared to tack. So you can you go with the wind, or you go with the opportunities that arise in front of you, that you take those opportunities every time, but make sure you're slowly getting in the direction that you aim ultimately to get to. Whether you get to the correct place where you originally aimed, I'm not too sure, but you've got to be prepared to tack in this life. And I think for the youngsters of today, there's no trades like the engineering that we had in the old days, tool makers. Everything's done by machine. I said to Jonathan yesterday, he's done so well at university for the first year, and the surprise to all the boys that he should do some programming, perhaps, of machinery, how to make machines work, and to have an alternative to what they're aiming at right at the beginning, because I've never been able to work CNC machines because of my lack of knowledge, and that really has been a handicap, because I just can't think in that I can't even use a computer properly in front of me. All right, that's really that is my handicap. I can't use a computer, not correctly. I can use my YouTube, and that is a wonderful program for me because it's all technical and I can see things and the way they do things. I watch programs on the television. How do they do it? Absolutely wonderful. Just a matter of interest. Being as it's Paul's 100th day coming still in hospital, I believe he's going to be interviewed by television people in Birmingham or wherever it is, ITV, possibly today, because he's one of the longest survivors in England of the virus. But everybody has taken an interest in Paul. The prayers and the thoughts and all that has been. It's been a miracle that he's still alive, and he's had a couple of accidents in his life which have been really very, very worrying for the whole family at various times. No, it's we're very, very pleased with the outcome. I don't think he'll ever go back to work as such again. I think that by the time he's walking properly, he will be 65 because he's doing so well at the moment. He's doing so well, but he's got to learn to walk upstairs. They're actually putting a handrail at Sue's house for him to be able to get upstairs, because if he wants a shower, the shower's upstairs. But there's a toilet downstairs. They may put a bed downstairs for him for a start. I don't know exactly what will happen, because I don't get the communications from Paul until Sue has sent them to Debbie, and then when she's back, I get that information, as to how he's doing. It's Debbie's birthday, my daughter's birthday, Deborah, on Saturday, and to be honest, I don't even know how old she'll be. But I'm proud of all my kids. I love them all. Love them all. Oh, they're great. Yeah, and all my grandchildren. It's lovely. Lovely to sit, and I love to speak to them too. Yeah. I'm very, very pleased with everything generally. Yeah. Now I've got Chris Stead, my bank manager. They're doing a program today at 11:30 to 12:30 on the computer on the effect that the virus is having on the stock markets and that. Well, I don't think they know any more than I do of what's happening. Mind you, the price of gold is up at $1,820 today. And that's why I feel that Zimbabwe, with all its gold and its minerals, that it really could be a wonderful country if it only went on to the gold standard and make all the rest of the world actually stand up and say, well done to whoever takes over. In fact, you should speak to Dave Coltard or someone like that and see if they can think of how they could do that.